This is William K. Mert. I'm Witness 1, and this is Thursday, January 30th, 2020. And we are in a dual countdown, because not only are we in a countdown for the number of days that Bill McConnell's been in jail, but now we're on a countdown as to when Bill McConnell will be coming to Florida. And notice that I didn't say if, I said when. Now, Phil McConnell filed a writ of habeas corpus. And basically all that is a demand that the state, in this case Florida, and the state of Wisconsin, show the reason and justification for Phil McConnell being in jail and eventually be extradited to Florida to go to jail there. It's a formality. It won't take very long. Judge will say, Mr. McConnell, this is the reason you're going to Florida. I rule that there's probable cause. End of story. Now, is there a possibility, however remote, that something might come up to change that? Possibly. I doubt it. But never say never. You never know what's going to happen. But Phil McConnell will find himself in the state of Florida by Valentine's Day, just like I said when all this began. Everything's going pretty well the way I expected. Now, what I did not expect are all these jailhouse calls, where apparently the rules in the state of Wisconsin, when it comes to this sort of thing, in the state of Florida, are quite different. Now, indications are, from what I have checked with the Broward County Jail, is Phil McConnell may not be allowed to make these calls. You know, when you read the manual that is put out, it spells out in there that there can be no conference calls and so forth, and then these jailhouse calls would fall under that. Now, Phil McConnell's calls are going to be monitored by the jail. And if they see that his calls are in violation of jail policy, they'll cut them off. And so we might see the end of the jailhouse calls. And what we're going to see instead probably are letters. And someone's going to have to take over to be the voice of Phil McConnell. The question is to who will that voice be and what will be said. Now, the one thing I have noticed is some voices have gone relatively silent. We haven't heard much from Dr. Good Vibes, Dr. Feel Good, whatever you want to call him. And we haven't heard from a lot of other people. Kirk Pendergrass is back doing his law thing. And over on Randy's Facebook page, the woman that seems to have been the purse strings behind a lot of things, it's going back to the old conspiracy theories. Coronavirus has taken up a lot of people's time and anti-democratic stuff. So we're back on that road. So not much going on. Tim Holmseth is nowhere to be found. We are over 2 weeks and coming up on 3 weeks that not one word has been heard from him, and now we're getting to a point where not one word is being heard about them. Fewer and fewer people are worried about him. Fewer and fewer people are wondering where he's at. Now again, there's two reasons for this. Two possible reasons for it. Number one, everything's all fine and hunky-dory and he's off someplace in some secret chat forum subscription-based live streaming, some other thing, and he's got his own little group of supporters, and he's still doing his thing. Now that's both an advantage and a disadvantage. By having everything nice and private and sealed, you minimize trolls. As a matter of fact, you virtually eliminate them, because you can screen people, and if you know how to do it, you can get rid of lurkers. And usually when there's money involved in these things, people aren't going to want to spend their hard-earned money for some private thing, no matter what it is. So his influence and exposure has been diminished significantly on that. And there is also the problem of getting out any information they may deem useful in the public eye. There's virtually none. So because of that, Tim Holmseth has basically destroyed himself, because there's no one to turn to. And when you have a private room, you got to be invited. And in order to be invited, you got to be known. And if you're not known, you're not going to get invited. Now, I am a member of a secret group. There's about 2,000 of us. It has nothing to do with Tim Holmseth. And it's invitation only. We've been doing this for years. And all it is basically a discussion forum. But it's invitation only. There's a lot of rules that got to be followed. And because of that, our reach is limited to the number of people that join this particular group. This is the situation that Tim Holmseth finds himself in. Now, he could have 2,000 would be about a correct number for him to have. If he has it, fine. If he don't, but that limitation is there. If you want to reach the most people possible, having a completely secret and private forum, blog, or what have you, is not the way to go, because you're limiting yourself. And that's where Holmseth is at right now. Now, I've been getting a lot of postings about CPS, and this was triggered by the Cynthia Abzug case and some discussions that people have been having with me around that. Now, I have a firm opinion when it comes to the charges against CPS. That does not, however, prevent me from talking about it. For there apparently are alleged abuses out there. And there are people that have strong feelings about it. And so, I am going to start discussing some of these individual cases. Starting with the Abzug case and going through some of these others. Because the one thing I am curious about and would like to discuss is what caused Abzug to go down the road she went down. What started all this? Why, instead of working with the system to resolve her situation and get a competent lawyer, did this woman allow herself to get caught up with these questionable individuals? Why did she allow herself to be persuaded to go on the run to avoid appearing in court and wind up in this nonsensical cloak and dagger road trip that she found herself on? Because it's only made matters worse. Cynthia Abzug has found herself in a situation where she is quite likely going to permanently lose custody of all her children until each one of them turns to be an adult. Now, I was sent material that seems to indicate that not all her children were against their mother, that the eldest son supported his mother, and that he wanted the children back, or everybody back in one piece, which is understandable. And that there may have been false accusations made to the authorities about this Munchausen by proxy claim and accusation that apparently started most of this. So what has to be done here is to start going in and looking at all these alternative sources of information to determine just exactly what happened here. Remember what I said in the past. Sources. Check your sources. Find out multiple sources and see if there's another side of the story. And that's exactly what needs to be done with the Abzug situation. We need to look and see if there is some truth to her claims regarding CPS and whoever it was that handled her case. And then determine why she took the actions that she did. And how to prevent somebody else from making these same mistakes. Because there are mechanisms in place for people to appeal decisions and to fight the CPS. It may be more difficult. It may require getting a lawyer and so forth. More mainstream assistance is what I'm getting at here. Now, this is something to keep in mind. According to her companion, the college student, medical student that accompanied her on this little adventure, people involved with assisting her doled out at least $7,500 to help her, and perhaps more. Now, that $7,500 could have gone towards legal counsel to help her fight her case in Colorado, where all this was going on. Instead of wasting all this money on hotel rooms, gas, cars, tune-ups, and all this other stuff, that money could have helped mitigate her situation. You know, instead of going off half-cocked and running all over the country in a kind of sort of Bonnie and Clyde vacation. And so I'm going to examine Ms. Abzug, and I'm going to examine some other CPS cases where charges of abuse. And I'm going to investigate something else. Just before I left for the airport, I was linked to a video by a young lady who was calling out this bunch. Calling out Tim Holmseth, Phil McConnell, Kirk Pendergrass, and Chris Elliott. The latter being E-Claus. And this had to do with the incident of where the woman got this paperwork from the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force, showed it to the deputy, and the deputy threw it on the ground because he knew it was ridiculous. And this is yet another example of where people that don't know what the hell they're doing got involved in a mother situation that made matters worse. Yeah, I don't know the full story behind that, other than the paperwork that Kirk Pendergrass didn't help this woman out at all. And this other woman, apparently a friend of hers or someone that was helping hers, is pointing this out. This was a video that was done 3 weeks ago, and I was just made aware of it today. And so I'm going to watch it. and I'll comment on it later. But I watched about the first 5 minutes of it, and it's pretty clear that this young lady does not agree with the actions of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, as one might call them. Because their actions didn't do any good, and instead made matters worse. And there's a number of cases out there. There's a case where a child may have died because of the interference of these individuals. Because the father was somehow able to get into the home where the child was and killed him. Now, and this is a rumor. I haven't checked this out, but that's the story that's out there. And so that would mean that these people have blood on their hands because they got involved in a situation that caused the death of a child. And there's no telling how many of these cases are out there. Well, where these individuals have given out advice and taken part in actions that have either put people in danger or gotten children killed or unnecessarily removed because people have followed their advice. You know, this sort of thing is dangerous. If you don't know what the hell you're doing, you don't get involved in something like this. The stakes are too high. Talking about the lives of children, the lives of the caretakers of the children, the birth mother, all of this. And you start screwing around, you can destroy lives forever. You can forever ruin people's lives. And this apparently has been done over and over again. Got this woman down in Arkansas that seems to be fairly active at this stuff, and she's spending money, and she's basically wasting it. And it doesn't appear like this woman's doing any good. It appears like the lies that she gets involved with, she makes matters worse. And it goes to anybody else that's part of this little group. You know, this is an underground railroad, so to speak, of CPS warriors that are fighting the CPS and the perceived problems with the CPS. And in the process, they're ruining people's lives because they're doing it all wrong. Now, I get into messaging battles from time to time with people that believe that CPS is involved with massive amounts of child trafficking and all kinds of nasty stuff. And I still disagree with that. But there may be problems within the agency. And there may be a number of causes for these problems. I don't think CPS established itself for the purpose of redirecting children into slavery, sex trafficking, fake adoptions, and all this other crap. But I think what's happening is that a lot of unqualified, underpaid individuals are being hired by the various agencies, and this might be part of the problem. It's because the screening isn't there. And maybe that's where we should concentrate on, is screening and getting qualified people in there and getting the caseload reduced on these individuals so that more attention can be paid to the circumstances of these parents. Now, another video I saw last night brought out the point that not everybody gets caught up with CPS. That a lot of times the reason for it is alleged drug activity on the part of the parent and other factors. And the individual doing the video pointed out that Northwest Liberty News may be dispensing false information of his own and stating that it's frequent that CPS will tamper with drug test results to the point where someone is innocent loses their children. Now, by that, There are some cases where an alleged a caretaker or a mother who is alleged to be abusing drugs has to take a drug test. And that drug test comes back positive. But, according to Northwest Liberty News, the woman takes the drug test is tampered with or faked, and an innocent woman that came back negative on the drug test is instead told that her drug test is positive, and she loses custody of the child. This is a common excuse. I hear it all the time. Now that, in fact, may or may not be true. Now, what could have been done is that an independent test be done by an outside party. The woman could have gotten herself a lawyer or someone that could take her to an independent lab, have the test done, and then match it with the CPS test. Because in a lot of cases, if you're on drugs, those drugs don't go away for a long time. They're in your system. Marijuana is a good example of that. It's been said that marijuana will stay in your system up to 30 days. And so it's hard to get around a positive marijuana test. Now, I understand that someone is caught tampering with a drug test. Very serious crime. It's felony. You can go to prison for a long time. This is not a traffic ticket. It's not a parking ticket. It's forging an official document. Because that's what it is. You know, you're swearing and attesting that the contents of that test are accurate and true. It's a form of perjury when you violate that. You know, it's tampering with evidence. All kinds of stuff. You can get in big trouble when you're caught. So why would somebody risk going to prison for 4 or 5 years or even a year or two to screw around with a drug test? It makes no sense. I mean, could it happen? Yeah. There could be some reason for it. Maybe the person doesn't think they're going to get caught. But that's the reason the penalty is so high. Because they catch one person, it's a disincentive for someone else to do the same thing. If you're reading the paper where somebody got caught committing a criminal act and they got 4 years in prison, you're not about to do it. Say, geez, if they get caught, I can get caught. So it cuts down on the number of people that commit the crime. Now, yeah, a lot of drugs that are used right now are felonies. But the difference is that drugs are addictive, and it's hard to fight. Once you get hooked on these drugs, it's hard to fight them. You have to go through a very complicated and strict process to get yourself off these drugs and to stay off the drugs. Whether it be something like alcohol, right on up to heroin and so on. You know, it's a lifelong fight once you get caught in that trap. So that's totally different than screwing around with drug tests and so forth. Which is the allegation here. And the same goes if you're caught trafficking, human trafficking and stuff like this. These are very serious crimes with very severe penalties. So the stakes are high. And the people that would take part in these things are not lawyers or professionals, they're street gangs. Crime bosses, mafias, crime syndicates. Those are the people who get involved in this stuff, not necessarily otherwise honest people. Now people bring up Epstein and so on. Epstein could be considered a mobster. It is not clear how Epstein made his money. Now, he had a rather broad label of being involved in investments and stuff, but it really never was clear. The money was there. He just accumulated a horrendous amount of money in ways that really don't make much sense. So, you have that. But the thing of it is I think that while this is a serious problem, this human trafficking and so on and so forth, number one, it's being exaggerated. That may not be, it's bad, but not as bad as we might think. And the answers to these problems are more conventional than just completely eliminating the system. Revamp it, reorganize it, study ways to improve situations to where this stuff doesn't happen, and go about it that way. But some of the solutions out there that I have seen, in my opinion, are ridiculous. To completely eliminate the system. And then if you're having problems with the system, break the law is definitely not the answer. Cynthia Ebzug is an example of what not to do if you get into a dispute with CPS. Because she now faces a very bleak future. Before she started down the path, whenever this starting point was, where it had to be sometime before her initial court appearance that she skipped, where she felt that they were already going to take the child in question. And she said, screw it, I'm not going to show up. Something caused her to make that decision. Someone may have persuaded her. It may or may not have been this bunch in the country club that they went to. It might have been some time before that. But at some point, she had it in her mind that she was going to have to not show up. Because it was at that point, the minute she decided not to show up to court, and the minute she did not show up to court, she was doomed. The chances of her being reunited with the children in CPS custody decreased significantly. And the odds are now to the point of virtually being zero that she will ever see her children again until they're adults. Now, the daughter, I understand, is 16 years old. So it's not going to be very long before she's an adult. And that she can make whatever decision she's going to make in regards to her mother. And when this case goes to trial, she's old enough to be a reliable witness. So if there was any shenanigans when it came to the initial report, as what was claimed on Northwest Liberty Radio, this will come out. The girl will get up there and say, well, this is what I actually said. I didn't say that she was going to do A, B, C, and D. I said something a little different. And she'll say it under oath. And that'll have to be taken into consideration. But if the daughter gets up there and affirms that what she said in the statement that caused the initial arrest warrant, then Cynthia has a problem. Now, another point that Northwest Liberty News got into was the warrant. He said that the warrant was published and handed to Cynthia the day after she was arrested. But this brings up an interesting comment that was made that left me scratching my head. And remember, if you go back and you watch the interview with Joseph, I guess that's the guy's name that is the companion here, is that this Arkansas woman had a warrant in her hand for her arrest. What? Now, let me repeat that. When they were in Arkansas, her companion stated, now the companion stated this on this radio show, there was a warrant. Cynthia was told there was a warrant. And that warrant was found. So there was a warrant. Now what the warrant was, apparently, was the original warrant that was issued by the state of Colorado for contempt of court. She didn't show up in court. It's the same thing that got Timothy Holmseth in trouble. Now, if this is the case, and it was a misdemeanor warrant, there would have been no need for these people to be running all over the country. They just had to avoid the state of Colorado. Everything would have been fine and dandy. But since they didn't see the warrant, they didn't know. So if I'm misunderstanding this, somebody in the comment section of this video, please tell me. Because I'm trying to square this latest rant by Northwest Liberty News with what was said in the interview. And that is that there was a warrant out there. These people assume there was a warrant out there, and they're on the run. And they're making all these plans. Now, as far as it comes, when I read the police report, another point came up that didn't exactly square with Northwest Liberty News. It said that they found the gun, the revolver, sitting on a table. So no, Cynthia didn't have a gun with her when she was arrested. But remember what the daughter said in the statement made to police that was dated prior to the arrest. And that is that the mother allegedly had talked about taking part in an armed kidnapping. Now this is a sworn affidavit that's given by the daughter. When you give a statement to a law enforcement officer, you're swearing that it's the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, and everything is true to the best of your knowledge. So we have a 15 or 16-year-old daughter of a woman who may or may not be involved in the armed planning of an armed kidnapping of her younger brother. And that the mother is alleged to be involved with people that she does not know that well, that have all these crazy conspiracy theories about people going through ritual sacrifices, eating babies, drinking their blood, and all this other stuff that we've heard from Tim Holmseth. And she actually met Tim Holmseth. So we have all this out there. So the cops don't have much of a choice at this point. They've got to assume that what the daughter says is true, and that there may be guns in the car that they're looking for. Then when this bolo went out for this woman, and that she might have weapons in the car, and she's involved in one way or another with people who don't seem to mind using deadly force to accomplish their mission, the cops have to go on that information. And so, Bolo went out for the car gets spotted, the car gets pulled over. Cop is not going to go up to a car and say, like they say, you're driver's license, registration, proof of insurance, and oh, by the way, do you have any guns in the car? Don't happen that way. If they have any reason to believe that there's a weapon of any kind in the car, they're going to come out with guns drawn, and they're going to come out in numbers. You know, anybody that's ever watched Cops or any of these police, true crime police shows, especially SWAT and some of these other shows they put on, and not the TV series one, but the actual true crime one, you know, cops are going to come out with the guns drawn. This is why, you know, cops wear body armor for a reason. They wear the Kevlar vest under their uniform. They look like they're in serious need of a diet because they run around looking like the Michelin Man, when actually the reason for it is that they've got a 1 to 4 inch thick bulletproof jacket underneath their shirts. And in some cases, if you've ever been to an airport, these people look like they're ready to go on the battlefield and fight Al-Qaeda. You know, they got the automatic weapon by their side, these big ass rifles. They look ridiculous. You think you were confined to a prison in the airport when you see these people standing around with these great big guns and the bomb dogs and everything else. It's called being prepared. Because in this day and age, there's a lot of bad things going on. And so when you get a 15 or 16-year-old girl that was probably showing emotional signs of being scared, that her mother was getting in the middle of something stupid, the cops are going to look at her statement and say, we can't take any chances here. We got to take precautions. Now, the daughter was living in Colorado at the time the statement was made, or so I think. I don't think this daughter was in northwest Montana. She was probably back over in Colorado. And because this woman was calling Northwest Liberty News, and they probably had a good idea that she was going to be there, it's logical to assume that the Colorado authorities called up the Montana authorities and say, you got this woman that you can assume is armed and dangerous running around northwest Montana. We need her picked up. And whatever, apparently it wasn't required to get an arrest warrant like the one that was produced on December 31st. And Montana was out on patrol. Somebody did a tag check and said, oh, there's a bullet on this woman, or on this car. And they pulled her over. Simple as that. Assumed to be armed and dangerous. Took the precautions in place. They knew the car. Bear this in mind. Now, all through the 3 parts of this webcast on Northwest Liberty News, it was brought out that they took all the precautions possible to prevent law enforcement from finding out what car they were in. They were using the car that belonged to a dead guy at some point in this little adventure. Now, somehow, someone, probably the daughter, knew enough about that car that they were able to trace the car. How did they know that the woman was in this car. After all this elaborate cloak and dagger stuff, throw out your telephone. Don't use this car because it's in my name. They got caught anyway. Somewhere along the line, somebody dropped the ball, and the information about that car worked its way to the Montana authorities. A lot of things being left out of this little tale involving Ms. Absug. And it's these little details like this that kind of make you wonder what the heck's going on here. Because you go through all this trouble of getting a car that nobody knows about, and yet they get arrested anyway. So someone, somewhere, connected Cindy Absug to this car. Now let's rewind a little bit. This is where people weren't thinking very clearly. Now, the original reason for having this particular automobile was because it was going to be in the father's name, not the name of this boyfriend. Whether it be the boyfriend of, I assume it was the boyfriend of the woman from Arkansas. There was somebody connected to the situation. And they decided to use a car belonging to a dead guy. Now, when law enforcement does an investigation, they look at every individual that may be involved in a specific situation. In this case, they're interested in anybody that might be around Cynthia Absug. And they're going to say, okay, now we got this one guy that's been named, and he's driving a car. And he says, okay, I'm going to switch car. I'm going to use my father's car. Well, law enforcement's going to say, who does this guy know? And the first thing they're going to do is look at his immediate family, his parents. They're going to look and they're saying, okay, here's his father. What's the father's status? The father's recently deceased, but there's a car out there in his name. Where's the car? It's easy enough to check and find that the car is being used by somebody. It's not where it's supposed to be. If you're dead, your car will be in, either in your driveway, or it's going to be someplace waiting for the estate to go through probate, or it's going to be turned back to the dealer, or it's going to be sold. So the first thing law enforcement did is they tried to figure out where in hell is this damn car. Now, if it's a relatively new car, and I discussed this before, back when I did my Eye in the Sky, virtually all new cars have GPS. If you own a General Motors car, you may have heard of OnStar. OnStar is a subscription service offered by General Motors. Has like a cell phone built into it, but it also has GPS. And there's been cases in the past of kidnappings and all kinds of stuff where law enforcement has used OnStar to find the car. Now, we don't know what kind of car was involved in this yet. May not be a General Motors car, may not have OnStar, may not have a service similar to OnStar. But if that car is financed, it may have GPS. Let me explain something to you people. I tried to do this before, and nobody caught on. Because remember, it was this incident that caused Phil McConnell to be investigated in the first place. It had nothing to do with him calling a lawyer funny names. It had to do with this case. as well as another case that is still under investigation. Automobiles sold by dealers such as me have the option of having GPS installed. GPS installed, excuse me. Getting my acronyms all messed up. There are companies that will sell you what they call aftermarket GPS trackers. They're not very much. And what you do as a dealer is you install these things in a car, in a place where people aren't going to be able to find them. And that way, when you finance a car, usually buy here, pay here dealers like me, you have the GPS in there so that if the person decides they don't want to pay you for the car and they decide to go running off someplace, you can track them and you can call a recovery agent and get the car back. Now I suggest you people go back through my videos and find that, and you'll see the devices that I used to use when I was a dealer. Because when you're a dealer and you're doing buy here, pay here, the person you're selling the car to may not have the best credit in the world. That's the reason they use buy here, pay here. It's the most expensive way to finance a car. Because you have to put down a pretty decent sized down payment. You have to pay weekly, and there's restrictions. In a lot of cases, you can't leave the state where you reside with the car unless you notify the dealer you're leaving the state. Because if you do that and don't tell the dealer, he has the right to repossess the car. Because there's a possibility that you could be running out on your loan. And so we got this car running around with a GPS installed. And all the law enforcement has to do is call up the dealer and say, hey, you got a GPS tracker in this car? We noticed you got it financed with this guy. And he said, yeah. Okay, then we're gonna send over a search warrant, and we want you to track the car. Okay. The dealer gets a search warrant, calls up the service, said track this car. And they track the car, and the car is sitting in somebody's driveway. So they go and they look at the car, see if there's any evidence in there, and there could be the name of the father in there, or, like a obituary or funeral notice or something. But anyway, there's going to be evidence in the car, one kind or another, because these people aren't exactly professional criminals. They're rogue amateurs, if anything. But at the very least, they're going to find out, and they're going to say, hey, this guy ain't driving this car that's registered in his name. And then they're going to check the car the father owned. And if it turns out that that car has a GPS in it, they're going to track it. Same thing. Call up the people that finance the car and say, hey, you got a GPS in the car? Yep. All right. We're going to send over a search warrant. We want you to activate the GPS and track the car. Track the car, and guess what? The car's in Kalispell, Montana. It's trucking up the road. Call the Montana authorities, say, pull that car over. This is the license tag, this is where it's at. End of story. Now this is a final point here, because I'm almost to the airport. But Mr. Genius from Northwest Liberty News made it clear that he knew, number one, that this woman was on the run, had a pretty good idea where she was, because he had to send the reporter down there. So somehow everybody knew where this woman was. That's aiding and abetting a fugitive from justice. That's helping somebody from flee and elude law enforcement. It's a crime. Now, he probably won't get charged because he's small potatoes. But it's an indication that this guy is willing to break the law to help this woman. that he enabled this woman. They didn't say, hey, Cynthia, it's not such a good idea that you're running around the country trying to avoid the cops. You really need to turn yourself in. No, he went along with it. You know, he's using the excuse, oh, I'm a journalist. Blah, blah, blah. You know, I'm just following a story. No, you're directly involved in interfering with a custody battle of a child. You're interfering in a way that might get you in trouble with the law if they were inclined to do something about it, and you're putting your name out there in public as, yeah, I did this. I knew where this woman was. I had a good idea where the woman was. I sent my reporter down there. I had the woman on the show. Didn't encourage her to do anything. You know, listened to her side of the story, believed everything she said, and basically cooked the woman's goose. Because that radio show is evidence. That radio show is evidence that she voluntarily did all this stuff. It can be used in court. Prosecutor can get up and say, Exhibit 1, Northwest Liberty News. Interview with Cynthia Abzug on such date and time. And it'll be right there. That this woman had no intention of abiding by the law. That she was going to obey the law and get her child back illegally. She wasn't going to file any paperwork or find a lawyer or anything that could mitigate her case. She was going to kidnap the child. So now the defense lawyer's got to fight all this. You know, and depending on how good of a lawyer she gets, may help her and it may hurt her. But she is doing herself no favors by going on this radio show and blabbing about what she's up to. And the host of Northwest Liberty News did her no favors by having her blab about her case on the air. There are ways he could have handled this that could have protected her. Because by not having her on the show and giving his opinion is hearsay. Hearsay evidence can't be used in court. You know, he could say, this is the situation with this woman so far. It's been reported that she is in protective situation with people that are trying to help, blah, 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 blah. Not give her specific location away, not give details. But instead, he puts the woman on the air, and she gives direct testimony. And this is direct testimony that can be used in court to get around the Fifth Amendment. Because Cynthia Abzug can march into court on February 11th and plead the Fifth. She doesn't have to testify. But she already has. Because she's been on all these radio shows. And Northwest Liberty News is the nail in the coffin for her legal case. Because she put out all the details on that show. Her companion goes on that show in a 3-part series. Confesses to the crime. Tells everything. He's probably got himself subject to arrest now because they probably didn't have the evidence to arrest him on that day when everybody got pulled over, but they do now. So this brilliant med student just made himself an accessory after the fact. So we better hope that law enforcement really doesn't care about him, and all they're interested in is resolving the matter with Cynthia Abzug. Because he could be facing some serious jail time. And if the story I heard is true, he basically just blew his career. Because it's my understanding he's dropped out of med school. And so he ain't gonna pursue that. Probably just as well. Yeah, there's other stuff he can do. Make a decent living. Do something to contribute to society instead of being a nuisance. You know, after the mess he's made of everything, he didn't try to talk Cynthia into doing something sensible. He went along with this crap. He's the one that went to Fields. He's the one that went all these places in Virginia, Georgia, Florida, Arkansas, and eventually Montana. I mean, a guy, he's reasonably intelligent. He's a moron, but he's intelligent. He could have said, look, this just doesn't make any sense. We really shouldn't be doing this. We should go straight to Colorado, turn ourselves in, and find a sensible way of doing this. We shouldn't be running around the country doing all this cloak and dagger stuff. He shouldn't have fell for this Pentagon pedophile task force and this E-clause. That was the single dumbest thing he did, was falling for this crap. That Phil McConnell knew all these high-ranking officials and can get this case expunged with a snap of his fingers, because if that was the case, there was no reason to run away. They could have stayed at Field's house. They could have stayed at the studio. They could have stayed at Dr. Feelgood or Good Vibes or whatever the hell his name is. They didn't have to go running all over the damn country. But they chose to do it anyway because they weren't thinking straight. They got involved in a web of desperation. They felt something they had to do. They felt that they just had to go out there and do all this stuff. And now look at what they're facing. Woman is most likely, almost certain, never to see her child again until he's an adult and he chooses to see her. She's got to work on repairing the relationship with her daughter. Probably doesn't think very much of her mother right now for getting involved in with these morons. I guess it's her mother, in the end, that got the daughter in the situation that she is in. Because they feared for the daughter's safety, for whatever reason, and pulled her away from her mother. And the daughter tried to do the right thing. Daughter heard her mother talking about this stuff, and she got concerned enough about it that she called the cops. It took a lot for her to do that. People are criticizing her for that. I don't know why. It's the woman's daughter. The daughter knows the mother better than anybody else. Better than Kirk Pendergrass, Phil McConnell, Tim Holmseth, or this nitwit that's running this radio show in Montana. It's the daughter who has the most to gain or lose in this situation. The daughter now looks forward to the prospect of her mother going to jail. And I'm pretty sure that was in her mind when she called the cops. But she wanted to avoid an even worse situation for her mother by trying to put a stop to this irresponsible action. Because something gave that daughter the impression that her mother was heading down a bad road. And she stepped in and did something about it. That daughter grew up and became an adult in a hurry that day. And that's what people need to think about when it comes to, whether you support Cynthia or not. Is that the daughter is the one that was forced to make a decision here. Not the head of the pedophile Pentagon task force or the Children's Crusade or Postmaster of the World or any of these other people. It was the biological daughter of the mother involved in an alleged child kidnapping plot. And she was worried enough to take a step that can probably get her mother put in jail for the minimum of 5 years. And the loss of custody of her little brother. It's a decision that this daughter is going to live with for the rest of her life. That she had to take that step. And as she gets older and she matures, she's going to understand that she made an extremely drastic decision that day. But it was the right decision. That's what the daughter needs to remember. Is that she did the right thing. She stepped in as the only one that had any common sense to put a stop to a very serious situation. She stepped in to avert and prevent a disaster. Because this could have been a disaster of the worst order. This could have gotten innocent people killed. Could have gotten her little brother killed. It could have gotten her mother killed. Because this is something else to remember. The mother was in Montana. The mother had been all over the United States. But the mother could have just as easily gone back to Colorado with the intent of acquiring her gun, or she could have gotten another one and committed the crime. Just because there wasn't a gun at the car at the time of the arrest doesn't mean that they didn't intend on getting a gun and committing this crime. It just meant that at that particular time, they didn't have a gun in the car. They probably figured it wasn't a good idea to be running around the country with a gun in the car when there might be a warrant out for your arrest, so they decided to leave the gun at the house. And they just go back, get the gun, go do their thing. Because I don't think the mother realized that the daughter had turned her in. The only thing the mother realized is that there was a warrant for her arrest out there from the state of Colorado for not showing up in court. Two separate warrants here. The original warrant was from Colorado for a failure to appear. They wanted her for that. That's what all this was about in the first place. Otherwise, why be running around the country avoiding appearance in court and going through throwing telephones in the river and all this other stuff if there's not a warrant out for your arrest? So they knew that there was a warrant. This woman in Arkansas knew there was a warrant. It came out in the radio interview. I don't think Jim listened to his own radio interview because it's right there. There was a warrant. Now, when she was arrested in Montana, it was because of a criminal complaint made by her daughter that she intended to take part in an armed kidnapping, and her daughter reported. So they put out a bolo. The mother was held, and the warrant was issued. This is done every day. Where there's a complaint, they put out a bolo, the person's there, and they pull you over. And then the warrant is signed, and you're arrested at that time. People need to study the law the way it really works instead of making these weird theories on radio shows when it comes to the date of a warrant to understand how the process works. Because there was a warrant. And that warrant will come out in court. So. But as I've said, I could be wrong about this whole thing. It's my opinion, my conjecture, my rambling, whatever you want to call it. But it's also my opinion that a lot of people did a lot of stupid things. And now, not only is Cynthia Absek going to pay for it, but so is the child. And a lot of people that were responsible for what happened are probably going to get away with it and ruin somebody else's lives. So until tomorrow, this is William K. Murtaugh, Murt Witness 1. Have a good one.